Bibliophiles of the Internet. My name is Adriana and today I'm here to give you some graphic novel recommendations. If you want to get into graphic novels and you have no idea where to start, then my friend, you're in the right place. Before we get started, I do have a couple of disclaimers, and the first is that I am no expert on comics or graphic novels by any stretch of the imagination, but I've been around the block. I've read a few in my day and I'm here to spread the wealth. So this is by no means a definitive list, but I'm just here to do my part to help you, help me, help you. That made no sense. And the second disclaimer is that this recommendations video will not include manga. Normally I would include manga like the boss that I am, because manga is just Japanese graphic novels, but I have in the past made manga/anime recommendation videos, so I will link those down below. But without further ado, let's get into the recommendations. To start off, instead of specific graphic novel recommendations, I would like to recommend some comic artists. The first comic artist I want to talk about is probably my favorite at the moment, and that is Faith Erin Hicks. Her art style is amazing. She uses very bold lines, the images are very clear, and her backgrounds are insanely detailed. And not only is she very smart and aware as a comic artist, but she also has a really fantastic sense of humor, and that comes through in every single one of her stories. The second comic artist I want to recommend is Bryan Lee O'Malley. He is by far one of my favorite creators ever. I will read anything that he has made, and I consider his work to be a staple of the graphic novel genre. Bryan Lee O'Malley is another creator who has a fantastic sense of humor that shines through in every single one of his stories. He creates a lot of distinctive, memorable, and engaging characters, and I think he has a lot of really interesting stories to tell. And the final comic artist that I want to talk about is Gene Luen Yang. This comic is The Shadow Hero, which he co-created with Sunny Liu, and it's about the first Asian American superhero, but I'm sure you've heard of some of his other works like Boxers and Saints, American-Born Chinese, and Level Up. Gene Luen Yang sheds light on underrated, underrepresented characters, and that's what I really love about his work. So now let's get into some specific graphic novel recommendations. The first individual graphic novel I would recommend is Through the Woods by Emily Carroll. This graphic novel is comprised of 5 spooky short stories. And I've said this before on my channel, but all of the stories in Through the Woods really remind me of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark by Alvin Schwartz. So if you ever read those anthologies as a kid and you remember that really unsettled feeling you got at the end of every single story, that's the feeling that you'll have when you read Through the Woods. Here's a look at some of the artwork in the story. It's very bold and very captivating, and there's a lot of smart use of color throughout the entire book. The illustrations are both beautiful and haunting at the same time, and all of the stories are written to perfection. I very highly recommend this graphic novel. The next graphic novel series I want to talk about is Lock and Key by Joe Hill and Gabriel Rodriguez. Obviously, Joe Hill, son of Stephen King, excels at telling horrific, violent, and gruesome stories, and Lock and Key is no exception. This graphic novel series is about the Locke family. They have just survived a severely emotional trauma, and as a result of that, they have to move into this huge, creepy mansion. And what they discover the more they live there is that it's a very mysterious place, and they start finding these keys. And what they discover is that these keys can either open enchanted doorways or give the wielder some very supernatural powers. And what they realize is that they're not the only ones who know about these keys. There are outsiders who have much more sinister motives than the Locke family, and they're willing to do anything to get their hands on these keys. This series is very dark, sick, twisted, gruesome, but it's so exciting to read. It's a mystery, it's a thriller, it's got all of these fantastical elements thrown in, and it has some really fascinating characters. What else could you want? Next, I want to talk about Grizz Grimley's Frankenstein. This is a graphic novel adaptation of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. As you might be able to see from this gorgeous front cover, the art style is very distinctive, very Tim Burton-esque with these lanky torsos and strange proportions. Here's a look at the artwork on the inside in case you are interested. What's really great about this graphic novel in particular is that the art style is so out there, but but the story itself incorporates so much of the original text. So whether you already love Frankenstein and you want to read a really fantastic adaptation of it, or you've never read it and this is something that's introductory for you, I think this is an amazing graphic novel either way. Next, I want to talk about Americus by M.K. Reid. Americus is a YA graphic novel. It's more of a coming-of-age story than anything else, and it's about a main character named Neil who lives in a very, very small town. He and his best friend are obsessed with this YA fantasy series called The Adventures of Apathia Ravenchild. The problem is that Neil's best friend's mother is an extremely conservative religious woman, and when she catches them reading this fantasy series, not only does she send Neil's best friend away to military school, but she also goes down to the library to try and get a ban on these books. And basically it's up to Neil to make sure she doesn't get away with it. I think this graphic novel is fantastic. It touched on a lot of really important topics like religion and politics and how those play into the types of stories that we have access to. And it's a really great coming of age narrative all about becoming the hero in your own story. And I also have a couple of web comics that I really wanted to mention. I've mentioned both of these series on my channel before, but I think they're worth mentioning again in this recommendations video because they are definitely valid comics in their own right. And the first comic is NIMONA by Noelle Stevenson. This is a web comic about the title character NIMONA, who is a shapeshifter. She lands a job as a squire for a villainous character named Ballister. As with all great villains, his one goal in life is to get revenge on his arch nemesis Golden Loin. And so basically he and NIMONA work together towards this goal. It's really hilarious. It's smart. The characters are fantastic. I don't even know what else I can say about it. Pretty much anything created by Noelle Stevenson is amazing. She's an amazing artist. She's an amazing human. She's very aware. She creates a lot of really fantastic characters, and I just think she's great. In the description down below, I will link where you can read NIMONA, but I think it's also worth mentioning that it will be published later this year as a trade. And the second webcomic that I've mentioned a lot on my channel is Cucumber Quest by Gigi. So this is a fantastical parody on your traditional fairy tale story, your traditional hero's quest. This series is all about the title character Cucumber, who is very introverted. He would rather be at school learning magic, but he's called by his father to save the kingdom. And it's also about his sister Almond, who would rather become a knight than anything else, and how she gets thrown in on this journey as well. And the more time they spend on this journey trying to thwart the forces of evil and also encountering some really strange and wacky characters, they realize that it might not be as straightforward of a task as it seems. First of all, the artwork in Cucumber Quest is amazing. The coloring is just on point. The world that this story is set in is so fantastical and vivid and imaginative, and it's drawn so well. There is a huge, fantastic cast of characters, and there are so many different types of characters that make appearances and that have really important roles, and I think that's something that's very interesting. Also, this webcomic is a parody, so it's absolutely hilarious. Every single page has something worth laughing about. It's fun, it's smart, it's hilarious, it's highly entertaining. It has everything you could possibly want from a parody adventure story. And obviously, I very highly recommend this webcomic. And I will also put a link in the description for where you can read Cucumber Quest online. So those are all of the graphic novels that I wanted to recommend today. If I can think of even more, and I'm sure that I will put Goodreads links to additional recommendations in the description down below, so be sure to look at that. As usual, if you have any graphic novel recommendations for me, I would appreciate it if you could pass that on, because I'm always looking for new comics to read. And that's all I had for this recommendations video today. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you enjoyed it, and I will catch you on the flip side of the page. Bye.